Now to start off the first session, as Mr. Chandrasekhar had said, of TiECon Chennai 2016, we would now like to invite on stage Mr. Ashok Soota for the session titled, Why Not You, Why Not Now? Think new, get started, break your shackles, do something, go big, make a difference. What are you waiting for? Mr. Soota will be answering questions at the end of this session. Please post questions on social media using the handle at TiEChennai, and don't forget to hashtag us at hashtag TiEConChennai16. For those of you more comfortable with the traditional way of paper and pen, we will have runners in white TiEChennai t-shirts available across the hall. Please do write out your questions and hand it over to them. We will pass on as many as we have time for. This session is brought to you by Prodapt and Card Technologies. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ashok Soota.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great pleasure for me to be here today, and I must really congratulate TiEC in Chennai. I think you really are a marvelous organization. I'm not at all surprised to see the fact that you've been the top three of best chapters of TiE in India for so many years running. And thank you both Naru and VC for your introductions. Before I do begin my session, I'd like to just ask members here in the audience to get a feel and a profile of what our audience here comprises of. And that is to say three questions. I'll read them out first and then maybe request you for a show of hands as I run through the three options. The first is, how many of you are potential entrepreneurs yet to take the entrepreneurial plunge? The second one is, already entrepreneurs but no external funding. That is either bootstrapped, which is your own money, or friends and family. And the third is entrepreneurs with external funding, which could mean angel funding or VC funding or many of the wide varieties of sources available today. So let me just quickly ask the first one, how many of you are potential entrepreneurs dreaming of creating an enterprise and haven't just got started, or maybe just about so? So quite a few. In fact, the number of hands keep increasing. That's pretty good. It's at least 20+%. Then entrepreneurs with no external funding, that is either bootstrapped through personal funds or friends and families. Huge number, very large proportion. So almost like 30 to 40. And then there may be another category which is not included at all, who are not thinking about entrepreneurship but are still interested. And that is entrepreneurs but who've already got your own funding. And maybe at least, hopefully $1 million plus when you come to that, but any external funding. So a much smaller proportion than the ones who are bootstrapping. It's interesting to know the profile. I must say that a large part of what I'm going to talk to you today is based around all of the issues I've covered in this book, which is called Entrepreneurship Simplified, all the way from idea to IPO. But when I looked at your program, and I must organize to compliment the organizers here, I find that the theme that you have actually pretty much really covers and your program for these 2 days really covers the entire gamut of entrepreneurship. And I just chose to follow the sequence of the items, the first few items in the agenda, which kick off, in effect, your first session. So the first thing then is, why not you and why not now? And I'll take off from there. Very clearly, why not you? I say there's an entrepreneurial boom in the country. Technology changes, and I think that's really important. They're really making new businesses possible, which were just not feasible earlier. All the way from the PayPals that we've just now seen out here. And even if you look at the way the web itself has evolved, evolved, all the way from Web 1.0 to 5.0, it's making new experiences, new ways of reaching out to people. It's making things so much more real time, which is making new industries possible. The third thing, and though many of you have really bootstrapped your ventures, funding is available as never before. In fact, my personal belief is that India is probably the easiest country today to be able to raise money in. However, there is something to be cautious about, and that is to answer the question of why not now. You know, so many people enter into entrepreneurship with so much enthusiasm, and yet there's such a very high failure rate of new organizations. The numbers actually, I sometimes puzzle at them because they look incredibly high. Because the failure rates are 70 or even 80%, then why do people still keep rushing into entrepreneurship? Obviously, there's a glamour to do something on your own, but clearly it is something to be cautious about. And it is in this context that I have to also again refer to the book. It's really intended to be a handbook which helps you through a process of addressing these four questions, which is what and what not, why and why not, how and how not, and when and when not, and timing is really very, very key, to help you to improve the probability of success of your venture. Yeah, I'll keep looking at you so that you can. Okay. So now the next item on your program for this two-day conference was think new and get started. So the first thing that comes to your mind is, and I think I'd love to get a little response here again from the audience, that what comes first? Is it the idea or the decision to be an entrepreneur? So can I ask those of you who are already entrepreneurs, did you first get a wonderful idea and then decide to become an entrepreneur? Or was it the other way around? You were really keen on becoming an entrepreneur, you searched around and then selected an idea. So let me again ask the question, how many of you first got a wonderful idea and said, hey, this is terrific, that became your trigger, and then raised the thoughts of becoming an entrepreneur? Can I get a bit of a show of hands again? So, which is what I really expected. Not very large number, but let me pose the opposite question now. So how many of you had this urge to become entrepreneurs, went around searching for an idea, and then chose one and that became the source for making your new venture? So the vast majority. It's quite interesting. So there is a certain, you might say, a DNA of the entrepreneur. That DNA says, hey, I must be an entrepreneur. It's almost like a deep, burning, unfulfilled wish that is there in your mind. And that then makes you go out and search for your idea. However, in here, I must tell you a large part of the interaction I'm hoping to have with you and what's covered in the book is not just based on my experience, but is really based on the questions I get from the people whom we mentor, both Gopalan and myself, who's my co-author. We mentor who come to us with their business plans, we talk about them, and we proceed. And what surprises me is that actually that is the weakest part, which so often I think would be contributing to the failure, and that is that the quality of the idea has not been thought through deeply enough. In the end, you must realize that your IPO your venture is going to be as successful as your idea. And it's really important that a lot of detailed work gets into it. A lot of people also very quickly zero in on one item without really realizing what are the whole range of potential opportunities which are available. So the first thing that we actually do recommend is that for idea generation, you must have a process. The process is to first scan the market for a big customer pain points. Many entrepreneurs, of course, will find the pain point through a personal experience. And then you ask yourself, is it scalable? So it brings you to the question, which you have as one of the themes of your conference, of thinking big. Then you want to ask yourself, am I going to be a pioneer in this, the first mover, or an early follower? It must be able to be differentiated. We've also recommended and created a model of what we call as a kaleidoscope. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with what's a kaleidoscope. It's a small little instrument. You turn it around, and you get a new configuration. So here, the kaleidoscope really is you ask yourself a series of questions. Each one helps you to create variations into the business model of the product or service you want to offer. And then having done that, you zero in on a few, 2 or 3 potential ideas. You test them out in a very inexpensive way. You obviously can't afford deep market research. And then you select that and proceed to go ahead. Now, the issue really is that do you really want to be the first mover? And I must say, well, it's great to be a pioneer, but you must remember that Google was not the first search engine. Neither was Microsoft the first operating system. And when you come in to create a new market, you really also need deep pockets. You're really helping people to even realize that they have a need for a given product or service that you're offering. So there's absolutely no harm, no embarrassment of saying that you will be an early follower, and in that you come up with a new differentiated service which is radically and differently better in a differentiated manner from what has preceded. Before you go ahead again and plunge in, you need to validate your idea. What we are saying is live, breathe, dream that idea for at least 6 months. Share it with everybody whom you can, bounce it off. These people will all help you to adapt your idea. And then finally, you put it to a defensibility test. And what do we mean by that? Sooner or later, your own success will attract larger players. Would you be able to defend your offering, or what do you really need to do? Plan up front to defend your offering. So I'll come to the next item, which is breaking your shackles. Again, you can see I'm following the theme of your program. First thing that a lot of people do ask us, is this the right time for me to become an entrepreneur? And the answer to that is fairly evident, which is there's no right or wrong time. You're ready when you're ready. You're ready when you have the right ideas, when you're thought out everything as you go ahead. I myself happen to be a late stage entrepreneur. I started Mindtree when I was 58, and a late stage serial entrepreneur because I started Happiest Minds when I was 69. And yet at the same time, and we can see this in the profile of the audience, today the average age of the entrepreneur in India, experience-wise, is about 7 years, and of course it's getting younger and younger. But it's more important than that is to go in with your eyes open and not a glamorized view of entrepreneurship, of thinking that you're going to be able to make millions of dollars, it's going to be a wonderful cakewalk, and then you hit into all the struggles of creating an enterprise. You've got to be prepared for high highs and low lows. You know, the first time I heard this phrase mentioned, it's certainly not my thing, is from Kanwal Rekhi in a conference. I'm not sure again whether he invented it, but that is the nature of entrepreneurship. You're going to get lots of periods when you're going to get very, very despondent, and you've got to be prepared and resilient enough for that. And then finally, I would say that you take your entrepreneurial decision on what we call as the head, heart, and gut principle. Your head gives you your pros and cons. Your heart tells you this is what you're going to get passion in, this is what's going to bring you joy. And your gut is your instinct, which tells you how things will shape out. And when you look back on your decision, that you'll feel that you had made a right choice. I'll come now to your next item on the agenda, which is to how do you go big? First, I've already mentioned to you that you should have a scalable idea. We do believe that funding is very important as a fuel for accelerated growth. And you know, if you don't grow rapidly and you've got a good idea, somebody else is going to move in and get your market. So it's very important that you think in terms of how you would scale and scale rapidly before somebody else comes and captures that market. I know you have a session here in the afternoon which says VC with a question mark, and we'll see. But as I've mentioned earlier, we clearly believe that external funding is a very important part of being able to grow a sizable, viable enterprise. And of course, in the process, you get somebody to share your risks with you. The other part about going big, and that is, I think it'll keep coming through as a recurring theme in almost everything that we write about, and that is to look way ahead and then work backwards. So you have a 5-year vision, you have a 5-year goals, you define your values. And in the same way, you look at your market 5 years from now, you look at your funding 5 years from now, and then you work backwards to see what are the amount of funds you need to raise, in what installments you're going to raise it. Now, things won't work out exactly as you visualized, but at least you've got a game plan with which you start adapting as you go ahead. And then, as you go big, one of the biggest concerns you could have is, okay, revenue gets going, but you need to build your organization and your systems to keep in touch. And this is what a lot of organizations which look very successful in the beginning, I think suddenly begin to fall apart. Without being overly negative on one, I would say that Deccan Aviation was a great example. Wonderful concept, new idea, tremendous breakaway growth in revenues, but chaotic. And anybody who flew on it in those days knew that you could hardly get a flight on time. You could find that your baggage is not reached you on time. So it is issues like this that you need to avoid. Right now, I can think of at least a couple of large organizations, including one unicorn, which when I talk to their investors, we realize that they're really frustrated at the chaotic manner in which the organization is being run. And finally, very important is to become as profitable as soon as you can. You know, sometimes as you focus on your growth, and if you've got a fair bit of money, like for example we had at Happiest Minds, you think you can keep funding that while you're continuing to grow, but that's not right. In the end, revenue is for ego and profits are for creating a sound, viable business which will last through the years. The next point we've got is making a difference. You've got to, we've talked about a differentiated product or service offering, and here the thing I'd like to caution you is that no differentiator lasts forever, with one exception. And therefore you've got to see whether you've got a stream of differentiators which you can keep introducing every 2 to 3 years. The one thing which is the exception is your culture. That is something which you can truly create, which is unique to your organization, which nobody else can replicate. And it makes a huge difference. It makes a difference in the passion in which people will be working on your teams. It'll make a difference in terms of the value systems that are set within the company which ensure that you follow the highest standards of corporate governance and therefore don't take a shortcut which can only lead you towards failure. And to quote Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Coming to the next point, and that is, what are you waiting for? So the first thing is really the right timing. Not because of what your age is, but the right timing for your market entry, and what is the right time for you to raise funds. Now, some of the most successful enterprises have been created in times of recessionary conditions. Microsoft, again, is one very good example of that, but so many. So I don't think you need to wait for a boom market to say that you're going to enter your time into the market, but certainly for raising funds at each stage of your fundraising. The markets and the valuation that you get are going to be a reflection of the sentiment in the country. If you suddenly have a Europe slowdown, in the middle of your negotiations, you're going to see that the valuations will drop. So there are external environments which have to be kept in mind in terms of choosing the times at which you take some of these actions. Then planning your strategies and working backwards. I've already talked about looking everything way ahead. And then here, equally important, and this may not apply to the people who are bootstrapped. You may not necessarily need to exit in a sense that we are talking of doing an IPO or finding a strategic buyer, because you don't have those external pressures. But of course, you're not able to monetize your value either. I would say that you have to plan your exit strategy even as you begin. Do you plan to take your company public? Do you plan to find a strategic buyer? Your approaches will vary accordingly. And then finally, coming down to, are you truly ready yourself to be an entrepreneur? And here we've listed a few personal characteristics. There are obviously only a few of them. You're going to need resilience because things won't work out well. Everything certainly won't. You need perseverance. And then, most importantly, I would say is risk minimization. You know, everybody thinks of an entrepreneur as a risk taker. and there's a macho element involved in that. In reality, there's risk in everything you do, from crossing the road to even working in an entrepreneurial setup. But the job of the entrepreneur is to take a look at everything and say, how do I minimize my risks for my organization? And that is where, to my mind, you really need a full-fledged strategy. And finally, I'd like to conclude with saying that too many people will get into entrepreneurial paths, and then before they know it, they'll actually find that they're very deeply, so deeply involved and absorbed, that in the process, a lot of personal fun and joy has been given up. I think somebody mentioned here that the important thing is the journey. And I do believe that the journey must be a joyous and happy journey, otherwise it can't be considered as being a successful journey. So thank you very much. I'd like to turn this over for questions. Any questions you'd like to ask? I must also mention I will be around later in the day for anybody who'd like to perhaps grab hold of me to ask any question that you'd like. Sure. So your question really is that what was my motivation at the age of 58? You know, here I must touch on a personal thing. Many years ago, I had read a wonderful book called Wellsprings. It's written by a Jesuit priest. The very first exercise has a series of questions you ask yourselves. And one of those questions was, what are your unfulfilled desires? I had two. One was to be an entrepreneur. It took me a while, as I'll tell you why. And the other was to write a book, which I've also now just fulfilled. So that's both of them gotten fulfilled. And, you know, if you look at my own career, I've spent 20 years in hardcore engineering. So I had a very unexpected and lucky, unplanned switch to moving into the IT world. When I joined Wipro as president at the age of 40. Then I ran it for 15 years, and it is at that stage that I began the thought of setting out on my own. And really, I didn't need to have the experience of that industry. It was changing rapidly. Also, the first 9 years of that, Wipro was a computer company. The opportunities clearly lay in software, which I handled for 5-6 years and then started something. That was the second part. I very definitely did. So if you've seen, I've mentioned over and over again that I think if you want to scale rapidly, and particularly if you're entering an industry where you've got large players, you've got to have that money available. So we got a good amount of money. I must tell you where that money made a huge difference. The contrast between then and now is also very stark. When I started Mindtree, we took about $10 million in cash, which is pretty good for a startup. And when we started, the dot-com boom was on, so it was actually wonderful days. We were only 8 months old when the dot-com bust came. We had to completely re-strategize, what we'll call is pivot our strategies, which again is a very important strategy for entrepreneurs. And we could never have done it if we had not had the money left with us. We needed the money to develop new strategies into which we took the business. So money is absolutely critical, not just to scale, as I have been mentioning, but also as your fallback when things suddenly go bad.
Thank you. Sir, I'm going to be asking questions. I'm right here. These are questions which have come through social media from the audience.
Sure.
Here's the first one. What, in your opinion, are some examples of companies that have a great culture, according to you?
Well, you know, I'll tell you the first things that will obviously come to mind are the top few IT companies who we've dealt with. And Wipro, I think we had a wonderful culture. Then there's Infosys, which I think again created a almost different sort of a hallmark in the way things started. But there must be many other companies which are young startups, which is what would be far better role models for all of you all to follow. And I should add, Cognizance also has a wonderful culture, very dynamic, very entrepreneurial. Where I think you could really learn, I do believe that we have at Mindtree we created a wonderful culture. At Happiest Minds today, we've created a culture which is built around our values and our vision, the theme of happiness, mindfulness as an experience. So lots of it, and then you'll find many, many more. Very difficult to define for me to pick up, but out of the many startups that I do see, many of them which are going to go on to be the most successful ones, I believe have focused very much on culture, whereas when you've got 100 problems facing you when you start, a lot of organizations don't even give that adequate thought.
Thank you. So the next question that we have is, how does one balance risk minimization and true blue sky thinking?
That's a wonderful question. You know, that is a very good question. And to my mind, these are not either or. You think of your most wonderful blue skies idea, you start implementing it, but quite independent of that, you take your idea and you identify your risks. And then you decide how you're going to minimize the risks for the given environment which you're going to address. So risk minimization is a critical part of everything you're doing. Whether you're choosing a blue skies completely pioneering approach or even in another venture where you're entering a market where there are multiple other people, there are going to be risks everywhere. And it's critical that you think through those risks. Those risks that we are talking about are not like the risks you'll see in an IPO document where everything under the sun is mentioned so that somebody should not be able to sue you. These are the real risks that your business will face, and it can include everything from how you're going to get the right talent in a very tight competitive market, in terms of how you're going to scale, in terms of how you're going to be able to compete against very much larger players.
Thank you, sir. Now, here's another question. Why should a startup almost always look for funding rather than bootstrapping?
Sure. So again, frankly, there's a statement which says that all generalizations are untrue, including this one. That's G.K. Chesterton, by the way. And so when we say that, look, we truly, truly recommend that you go out and get funding, and there are so many of you who've bootstrapped out here, you might say, why does one necessarily recommend it? First thing, of course, is that I do believe that when you go to some external entity with your plan, and they also then endorse your plan, it validates your idea. And it's not that these people will just validate your idea, they'll help to think it through, they'll adapt to your idea. They'll help you to modify your business plan. I think it adds a huge amount of value towards the size. Second is obviously you need funding in order to scale your enterprise. If you've got a great idea and you don't scale fast enough, somebody's going to come and capture that market. The disadvantage, of course, is you've shared your ownership. But is it worthwhile to create an organization which is going to be 10 times or 20 times higher by virtue of having taken that external funding rather than settling for bootstrapping? So I think in our view, the answer is fairly evident. Now, there can be many industries where you will choose to bootstrap. And that's a good enough reason. You're bootstrapping with a view to building value and then going to the market at a much higher valuation. But as you'll see in the book that we've written, you know, when you go to a VC, it's also the VC's opportunity to enter on the ground floor. And to that extent, you can still make a great case for a high value or a high valuation even as you start the company.
So your thoughts on major trends that will completely change IT, like automation or artificial intelligence?
You know, the good news is that there are major trends every day. I mean, the pace of change is unbelievable. And I talked to you about the evolution of web from Web 1.0 to 5.0. You know, how many years did it happen? Whoever's asked this question is clearly focused on AI. And you can see the number of opportunities which are coming up just due to AI. But then again, you look around, I know a person here who's very much involved in fintech world, Mahesh, and what's coming in that world? There's blockchain, and it's not confined anymore to just the fintech world. It's suddenly finding new applications everywhere. So what happens with technology is it changes things so rapidly at a pace which you've never visualized in the past, that becomes the source of all your new ideas, or not all maybe, but a very large number, and how you apply that technology becomes your major differentiator.
Sir, could you expand on some more details on balancing growth and profits, especially in a small firm?
Yeah. You know, sometimes in a small firm it's probably easier to get to profits because you kept your organization lean and mean. And that's again another reason why you might want to bootstrap. Certainly I would not bootstrap a company if I did not visualize that we could see the path for profitability as available within the source of the funds that we have. Because if you don't, you'll reach a situation where you've started building the company, you run out of funds, and that is the single largest failure, cause of failure for companies. In the end, people may say the market wasn't there or the market wasn't ready, but if you'd had enough money, you would have seen it through. So therefore, the importance of saying, while you're obviously going to plan for growth, you've also got to equally plan for becoming profitable as reasonably early as possible.
So how do you choose the right investor to ensure your vision can still exist in while you're striving for company growth?
Sure. This is another very important point. We've got a whole chapter in this book called Winning with VCs. And when you're dealing with VCs, sometimes I think you'd be very anxious to get your money and grab the very first offer that comes your way. But you do realize if you've got a good opportunity, you've also got multiple other people who should be interested in it. And I wouldn't say that you should, for one thing, grab the first offer. You should certainly do some reference checks on the VCs with others who've been through them. What is their style? What is their approach? Is it truly intelligent money? Can they truly help you in the business which you're entering into? How much do they understand of that sector? So I'd say some of those factors become rather important in terms of choosing the investor you're going with. The other type of question that will come is, do I go with an angel? Do I go with a VC? My personal view again is, if you can convince the VC to come in along with you, you can get a good valuation, then it's far better to go that way. Simply because every round, every investor wants a certain percentage of your company. And to that extent, if you start with a larger number but have not had to part with too much, thereby you would end up finding that you diluted your company far less by the time you reach your IPO stage.
This question that I'm going to ask you seems fitting, since it's going to be the last question we have. Where do you see entrepreneurship in India evolving in the years to come, given that we seem to be on the brink of change?
Yeah, I think this room itself is a wonderful idea of how it's evolving. I mean, and you mentioned that, I think our president mentioned that when he was first standing here with your first TiCon, he was concerned about not having a hall which was going to be full, and now you've got a hall which is splitting at its seams. We do have people standing at the back, and I think I see this virtually everywhere I go. The entrepreneurial boom is absolutely huge. What I would like to see, now we've got multiple programs. We've got, for example, a 10,000 startups program at NASSCON, which I think is a very good one. Where it may fall short is that so many of them are just 1, 2, 3 people tinkering around. Then we've got another thing which I really came across wonderfully well in Bangalore just last week, because I was invited to speak at that event. There was something called a Makers program. I'm sure many of you here would be familiar. I was not. And they're inventors. We had young kids coming out of college who've invented drones, who've invented systems with dynamic artificial lighting, which is changing all the time inside a room. So many different types of invention-based new ideas in fueling the boom for entrepreneurship. So again, it's happening all around us. It's a wonderful, exciting time. There's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. So therefore, I would clearly endorse the theme of the program of why not you, why not now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that most illuminating session. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ashok Soota will be available for book signings of his latest work, Entrepreneurship Simplified, From India to IPO, outside at halls 7 and 8 during lunch. Please be sure to head that way to get your personalized copy.